He, a skeptical tycoon, secretly loved a woman who saw herself as invisible and unworthy. In her pain, she exclaims, "I'm not good enough for you." He can't take it anymore. With teary eyes, he reveals his love, that her worth is everything. A secret love turns into a scandal, but her soul might heal his heart. Watch this story to the end. You'll be amazed by it. If you enjoy love stories and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Now back to the story. The light March rain transformed the streets of Manhattan into a grey mirror, reflecting the lights of skyscrapers that disappeared into the low clouds. Emily Carter adjusted the strap of her worn bag on her shoulder and hurried along the wet sidewalks of Greenwich Village. Her synthetic leather shoes made a muffled noise against the damp concrete as she headed to the small Greenwich Village Community Library, where she had worked for 3 years. At 28, Emily carried the weight of responsibilities that should have been shared by an entire family. Her brown eyes, although tired, still held a spark of determination that sustained her through difficult days. Her modest salary as a library assistant barely covered her father's medical expenses as he suffered from advanced diabetes and the studies of her younger sister Lily, who dreamed of becoming a nurse. Emily knew every book on those shelves, as if they were old friends. The library, an old townhouse converted into a cultural space, received a small municipal grant and some sporadic donations that allowed its survival. What she didn't know was that the largest of these donations came monthly through an anonymous foundation, deposited silently into the institution's account. On the other side of town, on the 47th floor of a mirrored building on Park Avenue, Jason Sterling watched the movement of the streets through the panoramic windows of his office. At 40, he commanded a tech empire he had built with his own hands after inheriting a small software company from his father. His brilliant mind and strategic vision had transformed him into one of the most respected and feared entrepreneurs in the country. Jason was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. Past relationships had taught him that genuine interest was a rare commodity in his world. Women approached him for what he possessed, not for who he was. Friends revealed themselves as self-serving, and even family members seemed to calculate the value of each word in his presence. This chronic distrust had turned him into an impenetrable fortress where he reigned alone. But there was a secret that Jason guarded as his greatest treasure. 4 years ago, during a routine visit to the social projects funded by his foundation, he had met Emily. Not personally. He had arrived at the library at a time when she was organizing a reading session for children from the community. Hidden behind a bookshelf, Jason had watched as she transformed her voice, made funny faces, and hugged each child with genuine affection. That day, something had broken inside Jason's chest. For the first time in years, he had witnessed pure kindness, without masks or ulterior motives. Since then, he had found excuses to pass through the area, always watching from afar, always, making sure she never noticed him. He knew of her difficulties, her sleepless nights caring for her sick father, her small dreams that she cherished in silence. Jason had fallen in love with a woman who didn't know of his existence, and that was simultaneously his torture and his solace. She represented everything he had lost hope of finding: authenticity, compassion, quiet strength. But how could he approach her without her seeing him as just another rich man trying to buy affection? That rainy afternoon, fate decided that the time for observations had come to an end. Emily was organizing returned books when she heard raised voices coming from the entrance hall. She immediately recognized the aggressive tone of Mr. Thompson, the city inspector who visited the library monthly with the sole purpose of finding irregularities. "This library is a waste of public resources," he shouted at Sarah, the coordinator. "A handful of old books and 2 employees who can barely read properly. I'm going to recommend immediate closure." Emily felt her blood run cold. The library was more than her job. It was her refuge, the place where she found peace among life's difficulties. More importantly, it was the source of income that supported her family. Without thinking twice, she put the books aside and walked to the entrance. "Mr. Thompson," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "please give us a chance to resolve any issues you've identified." The man turned to her with a cruel smile. "Ah, the little assistant wants to speak up. Listen carefully, young lady. Places like this are a waste. You pretend to promote culture, but you're just a make-work program for unqualified people." Thompson's words echoed through the hall like lashes. Emily felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Outside, a black Audi had stopped in front of the building. Jason Sterling, who had finally decided to muster the courage for an official visit to the library, witnessed through the window the scene that would change their lives forever. Seeing Emily being humiliated by the public official, Jason felt a fury he hadn't experienced in years. Without hesitation, he got out of the car in the rain and pushed open the library door. The library door swung open with a bang, causing everyone to turn. Jason Sterling strode into the room with the commanding presence of someone accustomed to leading boardrooms and closing multi-million-dollar deals. His impeccable Italian suit contrasted sharply with the simple atmosphere of the library, and raindrops dripped from his dark, perfectly styled hair. "Excuse me," Jason said, his deep voice cutting through the tense air like a blade. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding here." Mr. Thompson blinked a few times, clearly disconcerted by the appearance of this elegant man. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is an official inspection. You can't—" "Jason Sterling," he introduced himself simply, and the name had the effect of a bomb in the small hall. Mr. Thompson paled instantly. Everyone in New York knew the name of the tech magnate. Emily, meanwhile, felt the world spin around her. Jason Sterling was there, in her little library, looking directly at her with an intensity that made her feel exposed and protected at the same time. She had seen his face in the business newspapers she occasionally leafed through, but in person, he seemed even more imposing, almost unreal in that everyday setting. "Mr. Sterling," Mr. Thompson stammered, his arrogance evaporating instantly. "I didn't know you had an interest in this establishment." "I have a great interest," Jason replied, his eyes still fixed on Emily. "This library receives significant support from the Sterling Foundation, and from what I just witnessed, it seems there are public officials disrespecting institutions that provide essential services to the community." Sarah, the coordinator, stared speechlessly between Jason and Mr. Thompson. Emily remained still, feeling both grateful and deeply uncomfortable. Why would a man like Jason Sterling care about what happened there? "There was a misunderstanding, Mr. Sterling." Mr. Thompson tried to recover. "I was just doing my duty to inspect." "Your duty doesn't include humiliating dedicated employees," Jason interrupted coldly. "I suggest you review your methods before I need to speak with your superior." The veiled threat was enough to make Mr. Thompson mutter quick apologies and leave the library with his tail between his legs. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Sarah was the first to recover. "Mr. Sterling, thank you so much. We didn't know you—" "The Sterling Foundation prefers to keep its donations discreet," he explained, but his eyes remained on Emily. "I'd like to talk to you about some future projects. Perhaps we can schedule a meeting." Emily finally found her voice, although it came out weaker than she would have liked. "Mr. Sterling, I thank you for what you did, but it wasn't necessary. I know how to deal with people like Mr. Thompson." Jason took a step towards her, and Emily noticed that his eyes were a deep gray, almost stormy. "I'm sure you do, but sometimes it's good not to have to face everything alone." There was something in the way he said those words that made Emily's heart race. It was as if he knew her, as if he knew exactly the weight she carried on her shoulders every day. But that was impossible. They were from completely different worlds. "I should go," Jason said finally, but seemed reluctant to leave. "Leave my card with Sarah. I'd like you to contact me to discuss how we can expand the programs here." As he turned to leave, Emily felt a strange impulse to stop him. "Mr. Sterling." He stopped immediately, as if he had been waiting for her to speak. "Why is the library important to you?" Jason was silent for a long moment, and Emily could see some kind of internal battle taking place in his eyes. "Because," he said finally, "places like this preserve the best in people, and that's becoming increasingly rare." After he left, leaving only the subtle scent of his cologne in the air, Emily remained standing for several minutes. Sarah chattered excitedly about how incredibly lucky they were to have such an influential patron, but Emily barely listened to her. There was something disturbing about the way Jason Sterling had looked at her. It wasn't the condescending look she was used to receiving from wealthy men in her rare social interactions. It was something deeper, more personal, as if he really saw her, not just her condition or her job. In the days that followed, Emily found herself thinking about that meeting more than she would have liked to admit. It was ridiculous. A man like Jason Sterling probably didn't even remember her name. She was just another employee of another institution that he funded, out of social obligation. But then, a week later, Sarah received a phone call that would change everything. "It was Mr. Sterling's office," Sarah announced, almost vibrating with excitement. "He wants to implement a digitization program for the collection and expand community services, and he specifically asked that you, Emily, participate in the planning meetings." Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "Me? Why?" "He said he was impressed with your dedication and knowledge of the local community." Sarah held her hands. "Emily, don't you understand? This could be the opportunity of your life." But Emily knew that opportunities like this always came with a price, and men like Jason Sterling didn't pay special attention to women like her without a reason. The first meeting was scheduled for next Monday at his office. Meanwhile, from atop his building, Jason watched the city and wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life or finally found the courage to fight for what he wanted. Monday arrived with a clear sky that made the Sterling building's windows shine like diamonds against the April blue. Emily stopped on the sidewalk of Park Avenue, looking up until she lost count of the floors. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the simple folder with some notes about the library. The building's lobby was a universe apart. Polished marble, ornamental plants, and the soft echo of expensive shoes against the floor. The receptionist, impeccably dressed, directed her to the elevators with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emily felt like an imposter in that environment, conscious of every detail of her simple but clean and well-pressed outfit. The elevator rose silently to the 47th floor, and when the doors opened, she was greeted by a blonde assistant who led her through corridors with works of art that probably cost more than her house. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you," said the assistant, opening a massive mahogany door. Jason stood before the panoramic windows, hands in his pockets, watching the city below. When he turned, Emily noticed that he looked different, less formal, more approachable, although still irresistibly elegant in his white shirt without a tie. "Emily," he said her name as if it was something precious. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Sterling." She tried to keep her voice steady, but the way he looked at her made her nervous. "Jason, please." He gestured to a more informal area of the office, with leather armchairs and a coffee table. "Coffee?" As he poured the coffee into delicate porcelain cups, Emily couldn't help but watch him. There was a natural elegance in his movements, but also something melancholic in his expression when he thought she wasn't looking. I'd like you to tell me about the library's community programs, Jason began, sitting down opposite her. Sarah mentioned that you developed several activities. For an hour, they discussed projects, needs, and possibilities. Jason asked insightful questions that demonstrated a surprising knowledge of the community's needs. Emily found herself gradually relaxing, encouraged to find someone who genuinely seemed to care about her work. "You have brilliant ideas," Jason commented when she finished explaining her adult literacy project. "Why didn't you study education or social work?" The question touched on an old wound, and Emily lowered her eyes to her hands. "I didn't have that opportunity. I needed to work early to help at home." "It's never too late," he said gently. "The foundation has scholarship programs." "I don't accept charity, Mr. Arthur." The answer came out more abruptly than she intended. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. It's just, you don't need to explain yourself." Jason leaned slightly forward. "I admire your independence. In fact, I'd like to propose something different." He got up and went to the desk, returning with a folder. "I'm thinking of creating a more structured social responsibility department in the company. I'd need someone with real knowledge of the community, not just academic theory." Emily looked at him suspiciously. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering an opportunity. The salary would be substantial. You'd have autonomy to develop programs, and you'd continue working with the communities you know well." It was a dream offer, but something in the way he looked at her made her uncomfortable. "Why me?" she asked, directly. "There must be people much more qualified." Jason was silent for a moment, and Emily saw something vulnerable cross his face. "Because you have something you don't learn in university. You have heart." "Jason," she said carefully, "we barely know each other." "Sometimes," he replied, looking out the window. "We've known people longer than we think." There was something strange in those words, a familiarity that didn't make sense. Emily was about to ask what he meant when Jason turned sharply to her. "Can I ask a personal question?" When she nodded hesitantly, he continued, "Do you have siblings?" "A younger sister, Lily. She's studying nursing." Emily frowned. "Why?" Jason walked to a bookcase and picked up a framed photo she hadn't noticed before. It was an old faded image of a boy and a girl smiling at the camera. "I also had a sister," he said quietly. "Caroline. She was 3 years younger than me." The use of the past tense did not go unnoticed by Emily. "What happened to her?" Jason remained silent for so long that Emily thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with an old pain. "She died at 22, leukemia." He placed the photo back in its place with extreme care. "I was building the company, working 18 hours a day, convinced that success was all that mattered. When she got sick, I thought money would solve everything, the best doctors, the best treatments. But it didn't," Emily completed softly. "No. And in her last months, you know what she wanted most? Time, simple conversations, for me to read to her as we did when we were kids." Jason turned to Emily with teary eyes. "I had forgotten how to do that, how to just be present." Emily felt her heart clench. For the first time, she was seeing the man behind the tycoon, someone who carried guilt and regret as she carried responsibilities. "I'm sure she knew you loved her," she said gently. "I hope so." Jason sat back down, but now he seemed smaller, more human. "Since then, I've been trying to find ways to honor her memory. The foundation is part of that." "And do I remind you of her in some way?" Emily asked, a suspicion growing in her mind. Jason looked at her with an intensity that made her feel completely exposed. "You remind me of the person I should have been, the person she would have wanted me to become." There was something more, Emily was sure, something he wasn't saying. The way he knew her, how he knew how to ask the right questions, how he seemed to understand her life better than a stranger should. Jason, she said carefully, how did you really find out about me, about my work at the library? For a moment she saw panic in his eyes. Then he composed himself, but not fast enough. The Foundation monitors all the institutions it supports, he said, but the answer sounded rehearsed. Emily knew there was much more to that story, and for the first time since she had met him, Jason Sterling seemed to be lying to her. 2 weeks had passed since the conversation in Jason's office, and Emily still hadn't given an answer about the job proposal. The offer haunted her. It was too generous, too specific, too personal to be just professional. There was something Jason wasn't telling her, and it made her uneasy. It was a rainy Thursday when the library phone rang at 8 in the morning. Sarah answered with her usual cheerful voice, but soon her face paled. "Emily," she called in a trembling voice, "it's for you. It's from New York Presbyterian Hospital." Emily's blood ran cold. She rushed to the phone, her hands shaking. "Miss Carter, this is Nurse Davis from the emergency room. Your father, Robert Carter, was admitted here an hour ago. He had a severe diabetic crisis." Emily's world collapsed. "How is he? Can I see him?" "He's conscious, but in delicate condition. It would be good if you came as soon as possible." Emily hung up the phone and leaned against the counter, fighting back tears. Her father had gotten worse in recent days, but she thought it was just a cold. His diabetes had been out of control for months due to the high cost of medication. "Go, Emily," Sarah said, already grabbing the keys. "I'll take care of everything here." The problem was that Emily didn't have money for a taxi or public transportation to the hospital. Her salary had been almost entirely spent on medications last month, and there were still 10 days until the next payment. In desperation, she began calling acquaintances, but on a Thursday morning, no one could help immediately. That's when she remembered Jason Sterling's card in her purse. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. His assistant answered after 2 rings. "Mr. Sterling's office, good morning. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling. It's urgent. Emily Carter." "1 moment, please." Jason's voice came on the line seconds later, laden with immediate concern. "Emily, what happened? My father's in the hospital," she managed to say between sobs. "He had a diabetic crisis. I need to get there, but I don't have—" "Which hospital?" Jason interrupted, and she could hear him moving quickly. "New York Presbyterian Hospital on the Upper East Side. Don't move, I'm coming to get you." "Jason, you don't have to." 15 minutes, he said and hung up. Emily stood in the library entrance, watching the rain fall. Part of her felt humiliated having to ask for help, but her concern for her father outweighed any pride. The black Audi stopped in front of the library exactly 15 minutes later. Jason ran out into the rain without an umbrella and helped her into the car. "How is he?" were his first words as he sped off. "I don't know. The nurse said he's unconscious, but—" Emily's voice broke. Jason reached out and touched her hand briefly. "We'll get there in time." During the tense drive through Manhattan traffic, Emily watched Jason drive with focused determination. He had dropped everything to help her, a virtual stranger. Why? At the hospital, Jason used his influence to get information quickly. Robert Carter was stabilized, but the doctors were clear he would need hospitalization and more rigorous treatment. "How much?" Emily asked the doctor, although she knew she couldn't afford it. "The complete treatment, including hospitalization and medication, will be around $15,000. Emily felt her legs weaken. It was more than a year of her salary. "Is there any way to pay in installments, or I'll cover the costs?" Jason said calmly. "Jason, no." Emily turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't accept that. Your father needs treatment now. he replied, already pulling out his credit card. We'll discuss this later. Why are you doing this? She asked, desperate. You barely know me. Jason stopped in the middle of the hospital hallway and stared at her with an intensity that left her breathless. Because, he said, his voice low and laden with emotion, for 4 years, I've watched you carry the world on your shoulders and never asked for anything in return. Let me help now. His words hit her like lightning. 4 years? What do you mean you've been watching me for 4 years? Jason realized he had revealed too much. The panic in his eyes was quickly replaced by resignation. Emily, you've known me for 4 years? Her voice rose in pitch, attracting curious glances. How? This isn't the place or the time. Jason tried to deflect, but Emily wasn't going to let it go. This is exactly the time. She planted herself in front of him. You show up at the library like a knight in shining armor, offer me a dream job, and now you tell me you've been watching me for 4 years. Who does that, Jason? Someone who fell in love, he said so quietly that she almost didn't hear him. The hospital hallway seemed to freeze around them. Emily stared at him, processing the words she had just heard. What? I fell in love with you 4 years ago, Jason repeated more clearly now, as if admitting it once had broken some barrier. The first time I saw you at the library, reading to the children, you were wearing a blue dress and had your hair pulled back with a simple clip. You did the voice of the big bad wolf, and all the children laughed. Emily remembered that day. She remembered the blue dress, the story of the 3 little pigs, the children's laughter. You were there, hidden behind the bookshelves like a pathetic teenager. Jason ran a hand through his hair. I came back the next month, and the next, and the next, always watching from afar, always making sure you didn't see me. You were spying on me, she said, her voice mixing shock and indignation. I fell in love, he corrected, with your kindness, your strength, the way you take care of everyone around you. You're the only real person I've met in years, Emily. This is... She shook her head, trying to process. This is crazy. You don't really know me. I know you drink black coffee because sugar is expensive. I know you always give your dessert to Mrs. Peterson, who lives on the corner. I know you cry when you read The Great Gatsby, even though you've read it 10 times. I know you dream of traveling to Europe, but you've never had the money to even renew your passport. Each fact he mentioned was a new wound. Emily felt completely exposed, violated in her privacy. You had no right. I know. Jason took a step back. And now, you hate me. Before she could answer, the nurse approached. Excuse me for interrupting, but Mr. Carter is asking to see his daughter. Emily looked between Jason and the nurse, her world completely turned upside down. I need to see my father, she said, but before walking away, she looked at Jason one last time. We're going to talk about this. As she followed the nurse down the hall, Jason stood alone, knowing he had crossed a line from which there might be no return. On the other side of the lobby, an elegant figure with graying hair had watched the entire scene with predatory interest. Beatrice Sterling, Jason's mother, knew an opportunity when she saw one, and she had just witnessed something she could use to finally bring her rebellious son into line. Robert Carter was pale against the white hospital sheets, but his brown eyes, so similar to his daughter's, still shone with life when Emily entered the room. He extended a trembling hand and she held it tightly. My girl, he whispered, sorry for scaring you. Dad, don't talk nonsense. Emily kissed his forehead. How are you feeling? Better. The doctors said someone already took care of everything. Was it you? Emily hesitated. How to explain that a man who had been secretly watching her for 4 years had paid for the treatment? It was a friend. Must be a very special friend, Robert observed, with the knowing smile of someone who raised 2 daughters alone after losing his wife early. "Do you like him?" The question caught Emily off guard. Did she like Jason? The whole situation was so confusing, so disturbing. But when he had revealed his feelings in the hallway, something had stirred inside her chest. Not exactly reciprocation, but an understanding that maybe he wasn't the predator she had feared. "It's complicated, Dad. The best things always are." Emily spent 2 hours with her father until he fell asleep. When she left the room, she found Jason exactly where she had left him, sitting in the uncomfortable hallway chairs, still wearing the suit rumpled from the rush. "You didn't have to stay," she said, sitting next to him. "How is he?" "Stable. The doctors think he can be discharged on Monday." Emily glanced at him sideways. "Jason, about what you told me." "Emily, I know how it must sound. I know I seem like a stalker or worse, but I never did anything that could harm you or improperly invade your privacy. I just watched for 4 years. For 4 years!" They were silent for a few minutes. The noise of the hospital surrounding them, nurses passing by, equipment, beeping, families whispering. "Why didn't you approach me before?" Emily asked finally. Jason laughed without humor. "Because I'm a coward, and because..." He hesitated. "Because men like me destroy women like you." "What do you mean?" "My world is dirty, Emily, full of people who do anything for money or power. You're pure, genuine. I was afraid that by getting close, I could corrupt that." Emily studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way he clenched his fists when nervous. "And now," Jason turned to her, "now I can't pretend I don't exist in your life anymore." There was something in the way he said that made Emily's heart race. For the first time, she allowed herself to really look at him not as the untouchable tycoon, but as the vulnerable man who had carried a secret passion for years. "Jason, don't answer me now," he interrupted softly. "Think about what I said. If you want me to leave your life forever, I will. But if there's a chance, even a small one..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Emily understood. That's when her cell phone rang. Lily was calling in a panic. "Em, how's Dad? I'm coming there." "Lily, calm down. He's okay." "Stable. You don't need to come now. It's almost 11 at night. But everyone at college is talking about you." Emily frowned. "Talking about what?" "There are some pictures of you on the internet, Em. You and a man in a suit running into the hospital. They're saying it's Jason Sterling." Emily's blood ran cold. Jason, who had overheard the conversation, was already typing furiously on his cell phone. "What kind of pictures, Lily?" "Pictures of you at the hospital, him holding your hand, you talking very close in the hallway. People are making up all sorts of stories." Jason showed Emily his phone screen. A gossip site had already published the images with the headline, "Tycoon Jason Sterling in secret romance with mysterious brunette." "Oh my God," Emily murmured. "How did they get these pictures?" Jason said through clenched teeth, calling someone. "Robert, I need you to find out who sold our photos to the press, now!" But it was already too late. Emily's cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, probably journalists. Jason's also went off. "I need to get you out of here," Jason said, grabbing her arm. "I can't leave my father. He's safe here, but if the reporters find out where you live..." Already outside the hospital, they were surrounded by camera flashes and shouts from journalists. "Mr. Sterling, how long have you been together? Emily, how did you meet? Is it true she's just another one of your flings?" Jason shielded Emily with his body as they walked quickly to the car. Once inside, he drove in silence for several minutes before speaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have foreseen this could happen. Where are we going? Emily asked, noticing that she didn't recognize the way. To a safe place. My apartment has security. Jason, I can't. It's just for a few hours until things calm down. Jason's apartment occupied the top floor of a building on the Upper West Side. It was elegant, but not ostentatious, with a stunning view of the city. Emily sat on the sofa, still processing how her life had completely changed in a matter of hours. Jason poured tea and sat on the other side of the room, respecting her space. My press officer will take care of this. In a few days, it'll be old news. And if it's not, Emily asked, Jason, I work with children, with conservative communities. If people think I'm your mistress, he completed calmly, that could destroy my career, my reputation. Jason was silent for a moment. There's a way to solve this. How? By marrying me. Emily almost dropped her teacup. What? If we announce an engagement, it changes the whole narrative. Instead of an affair, it would be a serious romance. Jason, you're crazy. We can't get married. I barely really know you. It doesn't have to be real, he said quickly, but something in his eyes suggested otherwise. Just until the dust settles. Before Emily could answer, Jason's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen and paled. Hello, Mom. Emily could hear the cold, cutting voice on the other end of the line. Arthur, darling, I saw the interesting news. I think we need to talk. Bring your friend to dinner tomorrow. I have some guests who are very curious to meet her. Jason closed his eyes. Mom, at 8 o'clock sharp. And Jason, don't disappoint me. The call ended, and Jason stared at the phone as if it were a poisonous snake. Trouble? Emily asked, although she already knew the answer. My mother, Jason said simply, as if that explained everything. She wants to meet us. From his tone, Emily realized that this wouldn't be an ordinary dinner. It was a trap, and they had just walked straight into it. The Sterling Mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut was a monument to power and tradition. Emily watched the imposing facade through the car window, feeling as if she was being taken to her own execution. Jason had tried to prepare her all day, but his vague warnings about his mother's strong personality only increased her anxiety. We can still leave, Jason said for the third time, his hand hesitating on the doorknob. No, Emily replied, smoothing the simple but elegant dress she had borrowed from Lily. If we're going to pretend to be a couple, I need to meet your family. Jason looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Emily, about this being pretend... Jason, no, not now. They were greeted by a butler who led them through hallways adorned with family portraits and antiques. The dining room was intimidating, a long mahogany table that could easily accommodate 20 people, but that night only had 5 place settings. Beatrice Sterling was exactly as Emily had imagined, elegant, cold and calculating. Her graying hair was impeccably styled, and she wore discreet but obviously expensive jewelry. Next to her, a middle-aged couple, the Oliphants, as Jason introduced them, smiled with malicious curiosity. So you're the famous Emily, Beatrice said, extending a cold hand. I've heard so much about you, in the news, obviously. Dinner started civilized, but Emily soon realized she was being dissected. Each question from Beatrice was a small blade, cutting her confidence piece by piece. And tell me, dear, where did you study? I finished high school at the public school in my neighborhood, Emily replied honestly. How interesting. And college? I didn't have the opportunity to attend. Oh, Beatrice exchanged a meaningful look with the guests. And your family? What do your parents do? Jason tried to intervene. Mom. It's okay, Jason, Emily said, although she felt her stomach clenching. My father is unemployed due to health problems. My mother passed away when I was a child. "What a tragedy," said Mrs. Oliphant with false sympathy. "It must have been difficult growing up without a maternal figure to guide you." The implication was clear, and Emily felt her cheeks warm. Jason was tense beside her, his fists clenched. "The library where you work," continued Beatrice, "I imagine the salary is modest. It's enough for my needs." Of course, of course. It must be comforting to know that you now have other options." The silence that followed was cutting. Emily understood perfectly what was being insinuated, that she was with Jason for the money. "Actually," said Mr. Oliphant, taking his cell phone out of his pocket, "I saw a very interesting article today. Can I show you?" Jason tried to stop him. "David, it's not necessary." But the man was already passing the phone to Emily. The screen showed an article from a gossip site with photos of her and Jason at the hospital, but this time accompanied by other images. Emily entering her simple home, her father being taken away by paramedics, her crying in the hospital hallway. The title of the article made her feel nauseous. "The Cinderella Who Conquered the Prince: How a Poor Librarian Hooked Billionaire Jason Sterling." "What a detailed report," commented Beatrice casually. "They even found out about your family's medical debts. Interesting how this information appears so quickly, isn't it?" Emily looked up from the phone, realizing the trap she had fallen into. "You leaked this information." "Darling," Beatrice smiled coldly, "information has a way of appearing when it's important." Jason stood up abruptly. "That's enough, Mom. Sit down, Jason." Beatrice's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Emily, you seem like a smart girl. Surely you understand that my son has certain responsibilities with the family, with the business, with people of his own social level." "Mum, I warned you." "Silence." Beatrice slammed her fist on the table, making the porcelain clink. "Do you think you can play house with any little nobody you find on the street? You have commitments, Jason, with the Van der Linde family, for example." Emily frowned. "Who are the Van der Lindes?" It was Mrs. Oliphant who answered, with obvious pleasure. "The family of Isabella, Jason's betrothed since adolescence. They're going to announce the engagement next month." Emily's world stopped. She looked at Jason, who was as pale as a ghost. "Jason," her voice came out as a whisper. "Emily, I can explain." "There's not much to explain, dear," Beatrice interrupted. "The Van der Lindes have been our business partners for decades. The marriage was arranged when you were still children, a perfect union. Same social level, same education, same interests." "That's not true," Jason said desperately. "I never agreed to this arrangement." "But you also never officially cancelled it," Beatrice retorted. "And Isabella is returning from Paris next week, eager to see her fiancé." Emily stood up slowly, feeling as if she was drowning. Everything made sense now. Why Jason had kept his distance for 4 years, why he seemed tormented when he talked about his world, why his mother was so confident. "Emily, please," Jason tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "You're promised to someone else. It's an old arrangement without meaning. Then why didn't you tell me?" Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of those people. "Why did you let me believe that we could—" "Because he's a coward," Beatrice said coldly. "Always has been. Incapable of making the difficult decisions, always running from responsibilities." Jason turned to his mother with fury. "You don't know anything. I know you're humiliating our family with this ridiculous charade." Beatrice stood up too, her posture regal and intimidating. "And I know that this girl," she looked at Emily with contempt, "is taking advantage of your momentary weakness. Don't you dare talk about her like that. I'll talk how I want. This is my house." Beatrice turned to Emily. "And you, my dear, if you have an ounce of decency, you'll get out of my son's life before you cause any more damage." Emily looked between Jason and his mother, seeing the family battle unfolding in front of her. She was just a pawn in that, power game, an inconvenient distraction that would be discarded when she was no longer useful. "You're right," Emily said calmly, although her heart was breaking. "I don't belong in this world." "Emily, no." Jason took a step towards her. "No, Jason, your mother is right. I was naive to think that—" She swallowed her tears. "That someone like you could really care about someone like me. That's not true, isn't it?" Emily laughed without humor. "Then cancel the engagement with Isabella, here now, in front of your family." The silence that followed was deafening. Jason opened and closed his mouth several times, but no word came out. "That's what I thought," Emily whispered. She looked at Beatrice. "You win. I'll never approach your son again." "Emily, wait!" Jason finally found his voice as she headed for the door. "Don't follow me," she said without turning around, "and don't try to find me. Consider it a favor. Now you can go back to your perfect life without complications." Emily left the mansion under the drizzle that had begun to fall, her heart broken into 1,000 pieces. Jason stood in the hall, watching the only woman he had ever truly loved disappear into the darkness. Beatrice put her hand on her son's shoulder with false gentleness. "You did the right thing, dear. Now we can move on." But Jason wasn't listening. He was thinking that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and maybe there was no going back. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner at the Sterling mansion, and Emily had tried to rebuild her life piece by piece. She had returned to work at the library, taken care of her father in his recovery, and systematically ignored the dozens of calls and messages that Jason left daily. But the peace she so desperately sought was shattered one Monday morning when Sarah called her to the office with a grave expression. "Emily, I need to talk to you." On the table was an official folder from City Hall. Emily recognized the crest and felt her stomach drop. "A notification arrived," Sarah said in a trembling voice. "The library is going to be closed. Budget cuts." "What?" Emily took the documents with shaking hands. "But that can't be. The Sterling Foundation supports us, and we've always met all the requirements." "That's what I don't understand," Sarah frowned. "The notice says that the foundation cancelled its support last week. Without that funding, we have no way to keep our doors open." Emily read and reread the documents, her mind processing the cruel reality. Jason had withdrawn his support from the library. After everything that had happened, he was taking revenge on her through the place she loved most. "I have 30 days to close down operations," Sarah continued, tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm going to have to lay you and the other employees off." That night, Emily was at home trying to explain the situation to her father when Lily arrived agitated from college. Have you seen the paper?" Lily threw a copy of the New York Times on the table. "Look at this." In the business section was a photo of Jason next to a stunning woman with blonde hair and a perfect smile. The headline read, "Jason Sterling announces engagement to heiress Isabella van der Linde." Emily read the article in silence, each word a stab. The wedding was scheduled for 3 months. It would be the social event of the year, the union of 2 business empires. "What a jerk," Lily muttered. After everything he did, he still had the nerve to get engaged to someone else. But something in the article caught Emily's attention. In a small note at the end, it mentioned that the Sterling Corporation had cancelled several social projects to focus resources on company growth after the merger with the Van der Linde Group. "Lily," Emily said slowly, "can you do me a favor? Can you find out when exactly the Sterling Corporation cancelled the contracts with the social institutions?" "Sure, I have a friend who works in finance. Why?" "Just a hunch." The next day, Lily returned with information that confirmed Emily's worst fears. Something's really weird. The cancellation of the contracts was authorized last Friday, but it wasn't Jason who signed it. What do you mean? It was Beatrice Sterling as chairman of the foundation's board. And there's more. She specifically cancelled only the projects that you frequented or with which you had a connection. Emily felt a cold fury spreading through her chest. It wasn't Jason who was taking revenge. It was his mother, executing a meticulous plan to destroy any connection she might have with her son. There's more, Em, Lily continued. I talked to some people, and I found out that Beatrice Sterling hired a private investigator to collect information about you weeks before. That dinner, she knew everything about our family, about Dad's debts, about your work. It was all planned. Emily closed her eyes, remembering the surgical precision with which Beatrice had attacked every aspect of her life that night. And the worst thing, Lily hesitated, is that I found out that she also spread rumors about you in the community. She's saying that you took advantage of Jason, that you pretended to be poor to arouse his pity. Did people believe it? Some, yes. Mrs. Gable from the bakery told me that you were always too ambitious for a girl of your level. Emily felt the world collapsing around her again. It wasn't enough to have lost Jason and her job. Now her reputation in the community was also being destroyed. That's when the phone rang. Sarah was calling in a panic. Emily, you need to come. Here now. There's a city crew throwing the books in the street. Emily ran to the library and found a devastating scene. Uniformed men were throwing books into trucks as if they were trash, ignoring the protests of Sarah and the few people from the community who had gathered. Stop! Emily shouted, running towards the truck. You can't do this! We still have 2 weeks. Court order, said the supervisor, showing a paper. The building is going to be demolished to make way for a parking lot. Demolished? Emily looked at Sarah in shock. You didn't tell me that. I didn't know. The order arrived this morning. Emily read the document quickly and saw something that made her blood run cold. The land had been purchased by a subsidiary of the Van der Linde Group. Everything was connected. Beatrice had not only withdrawn financial support, she had orchestrated the complete destruction of the library to ensure that Emily had nowhere to go back to. That night, sitting among the wreckage of her life, Emily made a decision. She would no longer be the passive victim in Beatrice Sterling's war. If the woman wanted a battle, she would have one. Lily, she said, picking up the phone, I need you to help me find out everything about the business dealings between the Sterling and Van der Linde families. And I want to know exactly what kind of pressure Beatrice is putting on Jason. What are you planning? I'm going to fight, Emily replied with a determination she hadn't felt in weeks. Jason may have abandoned me, but I won't let his mother destroy the lives of innocent people just to get revenge on me. She looked at the engagement announcement in the newspaper, focusing on Jason's face. Even in the official photo, she could see something in his eyes, a sadness, a resignation that didn't match an enamored man. Lily, I also want you to find out everything about Isabella Van der Linde. If I'm going to confront this family, I need ammunition. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt in control. She had underestimated the power and cruelty of Beatrice Sterling, but she wouldn't make that mistake again. The war was just beginning. Lily's investigation bore fruit faster than Emily expected. Within a week, her sister had uncovered a web of information that would change everything. Em, you need to see this, Lily said, arriving home with a folder full of documents. Isabella Van der Linde isn't who she seems to be. Emily looked at the papers that Lily spread on the kitchen table. There were photos, certificates, and even hotel records. She's been living with another man in Paris for 2 years, Lily explained, a French count. And there's more. She only agreed to return to the US because her family is going bankrupt. The Van der Linde Group is buried in debt, and the marriage to Jason is literally the only way to save their assets. And Beatrice knows this. Of course she knows. She orchestrated everything. She needs this merger as much as the Van der Lins do. The Sterling Corporation isn't as solid as it seems. Emily studied a photo of Isabella kissing the Count in a Parisian cafe. How did you get all this? My friend's boyfriend works at the Brazilian consulate in Paris. He gave me the information. Lily smiled. Isabella didn't even try to hide the relationship there. Everyone knows she has no intention of being a faithful wife. It was the weapon Emily needed, but she didn't yet know how to use it. The answer came the next day, when she saw an advertisement in the newspaper for a charity event at the Museum of Modern Art. The Sterling Corporation was one of the main sponsors, and both Jason and Isabella would be present. Emily knew she wouldn't be invited to an event of that level, but she had a plan. On the night of the event, she stood outside MoMA, wearing the only elegant dress she owned, a simple black one she had bought for Lily's graduation. In her hands, she carried an envelope with the evidence she had collected. She waited patiently until she saw Jason leaving the event, apparently needing some fresh air. Isabella was clinging to his arm, beautiful and cold as a porcelain doll. "Jason," Emily called, stepping out of the shadows. He turned sharply, and the shock on his face was immediate. "Emily, what are you doing here? We need to talk." Isabella looked her up and down with obvious contempt. "Arthur, darling, who is this person?" "I'm the woman your fiancé loved for 4 years, while you were having fun with your French count in Paris," Emily replied calmly, extending a photo to Isabella. Isabella's face paled as she saw the image, but she quickly recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about. Jean-Pierre Dubois, 34 years old, a count from a bankrupt family just like yours." Emily took more photos from the envelope. "You've been together for 2 years. You even share an apartment in the 7th arrondissement." Jason looked between the two women, clearly confused. "Isabella, is this true?" "Arthur, she's making it up." Isabella tried to grab the photos, but Emily held them firmly. "I'm making it up?" Emily smiled coldly. "Then you won't mind if I show these photos to the guests inside, or maybe to the journalists who are covering the event?" "What do you want?" Isabella asked through clenched teeth. "I want you to tell Jason the truth now." Jason took a step back, finally understanding the magnitude of the situation. "Isabella?" Isabella's mask finally fell. "All right, it's true. I love Jean-Pierre, and I only came back because my family forced me to. Do you think I'd choose to be stuck in this backward country if I had a choice?" "Why didn't you say this before?" Jason asked, his voice laden with relief and anger. "Because you're my passport to saving my family from bankruptcy," Isabella shouted, completely losing her composure. "And because your mother promised me that I could keep Jean-Pierre as a lover as long as I was discreet." Jason closed his eyes, finally seeing the whole plot that had been built around him. "My mother knew." "Of course she knew. She orchestrated everything." Isabella looked at Emily with hatred. "And you meddling busybody, just ruined everything." "No," said a cold voice behind them. "I'm the one who's going to ruin everything." Everyone turned to see Beatrice Sterling approaching, having obviously overheard the entire conversation. "Mom," Jason began, but she interrupted him with a gesture. "Isabella, go back to the event and keep up appearances. We'll talk later." Her voice was pure ice. "And you," she looked at Emily, "what pathetic game is this?" "The game that you started when you decided to destroy the library and spread lies about me," Emily replied, finding a courage she didn't know she possessed. "You have no idea who you're messing with, little girl." "I do." Emily took a step forward. "I'm messing with a woman so desperate to control her son's life that she's willing to force him into a marriage with a woman who's openly cheating on him just to save her own failing business." Beatrice paled. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" Emily laughed without humor. You destroyed my life, closed a library that served hundreds of children, ruined my reputation in the community, and you still think you have the right to be indignant? Jason, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke. Mum, is all of this true? Did you go after Emily? I did what was necessary to protect our family. Protect? Jason took a step towards his mother, his voice rising. You destroyed the life of an innocent woman. You manipulated all of us. I saved you from making the biggest mistake of your life. No, Jason shouted, his composure finally breaking. The biggest mistake of my life was not having the courage to stand up to you 4 years ago. It was letting you convince me that I didn't deserve to be happy. He turned to Emily, his eyes shining with unshed tears, and it was letting you believe, even for a second, that I don't love you more than my own life. Emily felt her heart race, but forced herself to remain calm. Jason, I cancel the engagement now, publicly. He looked at his mother with determination. And if you try to interfere in my life again, I cut off all family ties. You wouldn't do that, Beatrice said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. Try me. Jason took Emily's hand. I choose her. It's always been her. Beatrice looked between her son and Emily, realizing she had lost. Her expression hardened. If you make this choice, there's no going back. The family will never accept her. Then maybe it's time for me to build my own family, Jason replied, interlacing his fingers with Emily's. 6 months later, Emily was on the balcony of the new house they shared in a quiet area of Westchester, watching Jason play with the neighborhood children in the yard. They had opened a new community library, bigger and better than the previous. And Jason had gradually stepped away from the family business to focus on social projects. Mrs. Sterling, he said, approaching and wrapping his arms around her from behind, what are you thinking about? I still haven't gotten used to that name, she admitted, turning in his arms. Well, you have the rest of your life to get used to it. Jason kissed her gently, and Emily knew that all the battles had been worth it. They had chosen a love based on truth, on mutual acceptance, and on the courage to fight for each other. In the end, love had won not because it was easy, but because it was real.